And Jesus wept, for there were no more worlds to conquer.
Community fans will recognize that quote from Dean Craig Pelton and the episode where he first experienced virtual reality. The episode showcased how the obsession with VR at the time really failed to deliver on the promise, offering nothing more than what felt like expensive demos. We're looking at you, Batman Arkham VR. Has all that changed now that the PlayStation VR2 launched locally late last month? We spent the past 2 weeks with the PS VR2 to find out if it is indeed a better experience than its predecessor, as well as weigh in on its steep asking price, which is currently more than the PS5 console needed to use it at 13,499 Rand. This is what we learned. Let's start with the hardware on offer, which consists mainly of the newly designed headset, left and right sensor controllers, and the earphones. The VR2 headset features a new display, namely an OLED panel that supports 4K HDR per eye and has an approximate 100-degree field of view. It's a notable upgrade from the previous model and brings with it a few degrees more fidelity. This means content is going to look sharper and clearer. In addition, adjustments to the angle of the headset, tightness of the rear band, and distance between the two lenses make experiences more pleasant in general. The upshot of this is less eye strain, but we'll touch on actual gameplay a little bit later. Setting up the VR2 is a relatively simple process, with the user interface from PlayStation easy to understand. One element we're not keen on, however, was setting up of the play area, which often requires you to scan the environment as the headset maps your surroundings. The first time we tried, we gave up after 10 minutes of scanning, restarting the process before we were finally successful. This process of mapping might need to be redone depending on if you start a new play session standing or sitting, as well as if you start moving to the edge of the designated play area. In our experience, the best solution is to clear as much space as possible, with 3 meters by 3 meters being ideal. You should also be aware of anything hanging low from your ceiling like pendant lights, as we bumped into our own on more than one occasion while reaching for a ledge in Horizon Call of the Mountain. As for the Sense VR2 controllers, they do take a little getting used to, especially when it comes to using the L1 and R2 triggers, which are key to playing most games we've experienced thus far. The same goes for the placement of your hands while wielding the controllers in game, as you find yourself fiddling about or taking 3 or 4 swipes at interactive elements before you get things right. There's therefore a learning curve, which can be a little frustrating at times, especially if the game you're playing requires quick thinking or a fair deal of responsiveness. A USB Type-C port at the front of each controller allows them to be charged up, but for some reason, PlayStation has seen fit to only package one cable for the controllers. This seems a tad odd given the asking price of this piece of hardware. You can of course use the charging cable from your DualSense controller, but again, we would have liked to see 2 in the box instead of just 1. The last thing worth mentioning is the cable that goes from the headset to the USB Type-C port on the front of the PS5 controller. The cable sits over your left shoulder while playing and can sometimes get in the way. We're nitpicking here, but it feels like it should have been placed somewhere else. Now onto the all-important games, and here not all games are created equal. In the main, we played a handful of the AAA titles that released alongside the launch of the PlayStation VR2, as well as some of the other PS5 ones that have been ported to work on this new headset. This is where we need to talk about motion sickness. It's something PlayStation is acutely aware of, with notifications popping up frequently during the setup process, as well as while playing. When we started using the PS VR2, motion sickness did strike on occasion, but it was very dependent on the game we were playing. For example, when we fired up No Man's Sky, shortly after jumping onto our spaceship to begin exploring other planets, motion sickness hit, as the sensation of doing flips and tumbles in space seemed to be a bit too much for us too quickly. In Call of the Mountain, things were a little better, and only after a few intense fights against enemy targets did we feel the need to sit down and take a break. Gran Turismo 7, though, did not yield any ill effects. It may be that you're playing the game with only the headset and DualSense controller instead of the Sense VR2 controllers, but we mustered a solid hour of gameplay before we decided to take a short break and hop right back in. As such, for those who may suffer from motion sickness, it is highly dependent on what you play. As a general rule of thumb though, shorter bursts that slowly increase over time is the best approach to trying out the PSVR2 in our opinion. In terms of the choice of games on offer, there is a good mix, and the fact that some ports are available is welcome, especially given the price of current gen titles these days. That said, given the fact that something like Call of the Mountain, which is one of the hero launch titles for the PSVR2, costs 1,100 Rand and serves up about a dozen hours of play, doesn't quite equal bang for your buck in our view. Something like Gran Turismo 7, however, is far better value in our opinion. As such, while there's a decent library to get stuck into, we think things are still a little hit or miss when it comes to titles you'll want to pick up again and again. The PlayStation VR2 is an impressive peripheral. Better visuals, better interface, better hardware, and better options in terms of playing titles, making a stronger case for giving virtual reality gaming a try. There is, however, one significant critique: price. With a recommended retail price of 13,499 Rand, the PlayStation VR2 is more expensive than the console needed to use it, which too is not on the cheap side. It's therefore a substantial outlay for players who may only have a passing interest in VR, and are not the kind of die-hard fans that such an asking price demands. As such, while delivering a good gaming experience, the PlayStation VR2 falls into the category of want instead of need. Much like some of PlayStation's other branded hardware and peripherals, only when the cost comes down with future iterations will it begin to hold true value.